Welcome to the IGEOS show, where we help grow the passion for an extraordinary workplace. If you're listening to or watching this, we hope to strengthen your passion for a workplace that has the potential not only to have an extraordinary impact on your life, but also on the world. My name is Amit Riker, and my co-hosts are Valerio Pascotto and Timothy Galway. Now to you, Valerio.
Thank you, Amit. What drives our efforts is really a vision and credo to enrich humaneness in the workplace. For that, we interview thought leaders who have been inspired by values of compassion, empathy, and modeling to share their discoveries, challenges, and successes. Really, there is no time like now to change the tide, from hateful divisiveness to seeking similarities, from the myth of the genius to the wisdom of humankind, and from the fears of the primitive brain to the wonder of generosity and warmth.
To support you in this work of creating extraordinary workplaces, we would like to offer you a free worksheet you can download on the 5 disciplines of a high-performance team. Just go to IGEOS.net to download the sheet and learn more about us. And now, on to our guest for today. Welcome, conscious leaders, conscious teams. We have a very exciting guest with us today, Donna Morton, and we're going to have a fantastic conversation about finance and sustainability and learn about her journey and all the amazing things she's doing in the world. So before we dive in, I'm going to give you a little bit of background about Donna. So Donna Morton is CEO and co-founder of Change Finance, which is working to create 100% clean exchange-traded funds, or ETFs, for sustainable investments. Donna has decades of experience in sustainability, economics, social innovation, clean energy, and ethical wealth management. She was the CEO of a clean energy company and built a think tank which helped pass the first carbon tax in North America. She's also an Ashoka, Ogunte, and Unreasonable Fellow, and a lifelong serial social entrepreneur with international experience ranging from sustainability and economic policy to social justice and human rights issues. And one other thing that I want to mention about Donna is in one of the previous issues of Conscious Company magazine, for highlighting the 30 world-changing women, we have Donna in there listed as well. So she's doing some awesome work in this world, and we're very excited to have you, Donna. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be with the two of you.
Likewise.
And everyone else.
Absolutely. So Donna, one of the things we like to just open up with is tell us a little bit about your history and your crazy journey of how you ended up to where you are today.
Well, it looks a little bit more logical in hindsight, which is true, I think, of a lot of entrepreneurs' pathways. It kind of makes sense at 52 in ways it didn't necessarily make sense at 32 or 42. But in essence, I've worked on climate change and social justice for 30 years, trying to use my skills to be as strategic as I could at each of those moments in time. So at 22, when I started working on climate change, I did direct actions for Greenpeace. I put myself in a place where I got arrested nearly every 5 weeks for 2 years. And I used my body physically, my character, and my voice, which were the tools that I had available to me in my 20s. And in my 30s, I evolved to do policy work. Like you said, I worked on carbon taxes for a really long time and helped bring in the first carbon tax in North America in British Columbia. And then decided that I wanted more hands-on work. I wanted to work more directly with communities. I wanted to learn more about business practically. So I started a clean energy company that worked with Indigenous communities to help them kind of own their own energy systems. And I learned a lot about business. I learned a lot about economics and economic development, but I learned a tremendous amount about how poor people lack access to capital, that part of what traps people in poverty is no legitimate way to get affordable forms of capital to build infrastructure or start businesses. And those were my, I guess, the pointers towards the financial system, towards wanting to, in my late 40s and early 50s, learn, okay, let's go to the ultimate place of being upstream in the economic system, which is determining who gets capital, how much capital costs, and how we start moving money strategically away from bad things to really good things, moving money into the hands of entrepreneurs and communities, and seeing the parts of the economy we want to see grow while shrinking some of the worst harms to the world. And that's really what landed me in finance.
That's fantastic. There's, I see that there's a lot of influence on indigenous communities in your background, and where did that overlay come from for you, or why is that so meaningful or important to you?
I mean, like lots of Canadians, there's lots of us that have some Indigenous heritage. I have a small percentage of Indigenous heritage in my bloodline, but I think this is a moment in time where newcomers to places like Canada and the US, people that have immigrated, are actually asking important questions about what Indigenous people knew that matters today. So if we're living in a time where we want to learn, how did people live before we started trashing ecosystems and creating extreme gaps between rich and poor? Who knew how to do that? And I think one of the answers globally was Indigenous people knew how to do that. There were, tribes and nations that lived for 10 to 30,000 years in one place without deleterious impacts on the ecosystems. And so I think there's enormous things to learn from global Indigenous wisdom. I also think that if you look at the planet, again, using your overlay story, there's enormous overlays between Indigenous people globally and biodiversity that still is functioning to this day. If you want to map all the places in the world where ecological systems are still relatively intact, they also happen to be the places with the largest concentrations of Indigenous people. So there's large reasons, I think, for us to learn the things that have been forgotten in traditional knowledge. And I typically believe that the people that have been left out of the dominant economy often offer the most wisdom about how to fix it and how to heal it and how to transform it. That if you were an architect of the economy the way it is, you're invested in the system that's working today. Whereas if you've been left out of it, there actually might be something really brilliant, really genius, really disruptive that you can bring to that economy. And so I look for ways, and I'm always excited about strategies that gather wisdom from the margins and bring it back to the center in order to drive change. And I think looking to poor people, looking to people of color, looking to women, and looking to Indigenous communities is just smart in the 21st century.
Donna, you mentioned 30 plus years, and clearly the passion that you bring is very inspiring. What started you on the path of sustainability and social justice at a very, very young age?
I mean, I started as a student activist even younger. I was going to protests when I was 15, 16 years old, and then got into student politics. I think it was two things. It was seeing the rise of activist people like Dr. Helen Caldicott, who founded Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War. She had a very large influence on me as a teenager. And I remember watching her give a speech, and she described herself as an activist, as someone who was trying to change the world as her profession. She was a physician, but she also saw herself as this change agent, as a core identity. And I remember hearing her words and thinking, oh, that's what I am. I've never had words before to describe what I feel about the world and what I feel my temperament is, but she sort of gave me the language. And then it's been throughout the course of my life that I've realized I'm an activist, I'm an artist, I'm an entrepreneur, but I'm a change agent as a core identity, that it's always been kind of at the center of everything that I've done has been about how do I contribute to making change that makes the world better. That's really my sort of foundational identity. And it's been there my entire adult life, which I'm grateful for.
That's wonderful, Donna. That reminds me a bit about your TEDx talk, where you talk about heretics wanted, being a change agent, where challenging certain mindsets or social norms. Could you tell us a little bit about the inspiration of that, and what do you mean by heretics wanted, and has that shifted, or what does that look like then and now? Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
I think the inspiration for the idea of Heretics Wanted was really the idea of us as a society learning to earlier embrace the heretical actor. That sometimes, as someone who's been perceived as being somewhat heretical throughout different moments in my career, it can be painful to feel out of step with my society, to be wanting. I mean, when I started working on carbon taxes, it was the late 80s, early 90s, and people thought it was insane, that it would never happen. And when you're on the vanguard like that, it can be hard emotionally. So part of it was an invitation to the world to say, listen, someday these heretical people are going to be responsible for driving change. Why don't we embrace them earlier rather than have them suffer in the margins quite so long? And then why don't we also entertain the possibility that literally heresy, that the ideas that are so outside of convention and orthodoxy are essential to our evolution. And why don't we learn to appreciate that a little bit earlier in evolution? The people that have been fighting for climate change for 30 years, in another 5 or 10 will be heroes, right? We're not going to look at the people that led the climate movement as sort of Chicken Littles who ran around screaming that the sky is falling. We're actually going to say, oh, damn, why didn't we listen earlier? Why did it take us 30, 40 years of knowing about climate change to act on it? And I think for me, it's about learning to embrace change, learning to embrace heretical ideas, learning to invite disruption more willingly into our society, faster, earlier, and not be so resistant to change. I think there's something essential about the 21st century being a time where change is going to happen, and it's going to be rather violent, actually. And so maybe there's a gift in learning to not be afraid of it, and even invite it and celebrate the people that are at the fore of it. That I think that's important to our evolution as humans.
I like this theme of evolution, and it's a topic that comes up in some of the workshops that we do, Valerio and our other co-host Tim. This idea is, how are we continuing to evolve as humans, evolve as people in society? And in your experience, what do you see as what gets in the way of us evolving, us as a community, the paths that you've seen sort of along your way? What's shown up, or what have you noticed that's sort of popped up?
I mean, for me, this is where we get into the sort of consciousness, mindfulness terrain pretty quickly. Um, we are love and we are fear as a species. And the more we become aware and thoughtful and slow and conscious, we tend to do better at being love and acting from love. And the contrast to that is that we're reactive and fear-based. And I think that is the ultimate sort of human choice of choices, right? That we have to keep making this choice between, do I do what I do from love, for love, acting as love? And the only way to do that is to silence and quiet the noisiness of fear. Because fear is extremely noisy. Fear and the noise of fear, flows through people's television sets into their hearts and minds and causes them to cast ballots that are harmful. When we are an agent of fear, we cause enormous amounts of damage in the world. And I think part of getting older, part of the gift of being a woman in my 50s is I feel like I don't care anymore about using words like love to describe what I do. I used to sort of take a lot of heat and criticism for talking about my work on taxes, which I described then as, love made taxes. And I feel the same way about my work in finance, that I'm striving to build financial products that express love and respect and protect human dignity and protect the life support of the planet. That's love. That's love rendered finance. That's love expressing itself as a financial product in the world. And that's, I think that's my core belief and sort of the space I want to most lean into in the next in my own heretical evolutionary process. I feel like it's going to be much more about consciousness, mindfulness, being love in the world, maybe even more than what I do, how I am as my sort of next frontier.
I would have to recognize that particularly when love evokes gratitude and appreciation, it's perhaps the sweetest and most powerful feeling that as a human being I have experienced. What have you done to maintain that, particularly in light of some of the challenges you mentioned earlier, that you were arrested almost every other day, to stay away from anger and frustration and still have that sweetness of gratitude?
I don't know that I always succeeded. I think I was more angry and I was more motivated by anger when I was a younger woman. I think the shift in me really started about 20 years ago when my son was born. And I think I had a hunch that the core aspect of humans was love and gratitude and beauty, that that's how we were born. But I don't know that I had evidence of that until my son was born. When my son was born, there it was. There was this being who was nothing but light and love. There was no malice. There was no contempt. He really was the essence of what I think we all are. And I feel like that was my sort of my big gift in the opening of my journey. And I feel like as an older woman, I'm also transitioning into this new state of being, where I take more time and space to breathe and to meditate, and I am more conscious on a daily basis, even sometimes on a moment by moment basis, of whether I'm acting from love or acting from fear. I feel like my awareness of that is much more precise, and it sweetens my life. It's it's the gift I'm giving myself, which I think in the long run will make me better and better at whatever it is I'm doing. But the focus this time feels like it's shifting to how do I want to be in the world? Who do I want to be in the world? More than for the first time, what do I want to do in the world? And that feels right for me.
Such a powerful distinction between focusing on being versus doing. And I've had the privilege in the last 3 years to be 3 times a grandparent. So
Yes.
I relate very much to this bundle of joy and love that comes into the world. Yeah, it's very obvious.
Yeah, it becomes obvious. All the cynical thoughts about humans are born ugly or humans are born evil, or the stories in the environmental movement when I was young were really humans are a virus, and the earth is going to need to rid the world of this virus called human. And I remember hearing that and sort of painfully reacting to it, but not having a fully developed kind of counter theory. And it was when my son was born that I went, no, this is it. This is the evidence that we're actually lovely, that we're actually these beautiful beings of light. And now, what is my work in the world? How can I be in the world in a way that fosters that light, that encourages it, grows it? But that all starts here. That all starts with my own heart and my own capacity to be love and light. And without that, everything else is hollow. It's strategy. It's linear. It's not the life force kind of being drawn into us and then expressed in ways that matter.
Very beautifully said. Thank you.
Donna, that reminds me of, I believe in your TEDx talk again, where there was a shift for you where you wanted to go from stopping X to starting. And this idea of we are beautiful, we are love. See, in my mind, I hear that as like, oh yeah, that's where we see the beauty in starting and creating. So tell us about the beautiful things that you're creating, especially with the finance world. My understanding is there's already an ETF that you have. So tell us about starting and creating and what you're doing and how you're being in that.
Yeah, so for me, that shift came again in my sort of 20s to 30s, where I realized that there was something powerful about stopping things and that I needed to learn the art of saying no. I think particularly as a woman from a working class family, there was something about finding the power of no and creating lines and setting standards for the way I think the world should be that was entirely important. And then it started to ring hollow. And then I wanted to learn about, well, what would yes look like? So now I have this very defined analysis around these are all the no's. No to cancer-causing chemicals, no to sex trafficking, no to slavery, no to hormone mimicking chemicals, no to fossil fuels, no to mining. Okay, that's easy. So now, what does yes look like? What does an economy, a way of life, a way of paying for healthcare and education and upholding human dignity, what does that system look like? What are the ingredients of yes? And it's been more difficult. It's been more fluid. It's taken longer to really get inside the structures of yes, but I actually think that's part of the sort of magic of finance. Is in many ways, finance, in my opinion, is the mother of all human systems. There's nothing ever invented by people that is more powerful, more global, more far-reaching, more instantaneous. The flow of capital globally is the force of energy right now that is shaping our politics, where people work, how they work, destruction of the planet, or regeneration of systems. Therefore, if we can be precise and surgical and thoughtful and loving with money, we don't have to rebuild and repair and restore after breaking things. We actually get to be systemic upfront. We get to be upstream from business, upstream from jobs, because that's what happens with capital. When you insert capital into a business, it grows, it expands, it hires more people, it uses more resources, or it installs more solar panels. And so we want to be surgical and thoughtful and flow capital away from harm into healing enterprises. We want to move money away from practices that diminish human dignity into businesses that uphold human dignity and say everyone is talented, everyone deserves a chance to be an agent of change in the world. And so the finance system is this incredibly powerful system that has been, it still is the most male dominated. There is no sector with less women than finance. And it's only 2% of large financial companies that have women running them. It's a very old boys network to this day. So the opportunity to bring a team of women, and our team is 80% female. So bring a team of women who are outsiders to finance, but with strong competencies in math and in identifying the future businesses, which is what our team is good at. We're really good at being futurists in finance, right? Identifying what are the areas that are most likely to grow? What are the areas most likely to contract? How do we make smart decisions about investing in those growth spaces? But you don't have to be a rocket scientist in 2018 to determine that there will be more growth in renewables than in fossil fuel. So we don't invest in fossil, we invest in renewables. There will be more growth in good food, in community-owned agriculture, in organic agriculture. That's where growth will be, not in agribusiness that depletes the soil and treats land and animal badly. There will be more growth in good housing, housing that's built to last again, not in shabby housing that's designed to be built and torn down in 30 years. There will be more growth in healthy food, not in food linked to obesity and childhood cancer. So we don't invest in the bad things that are disappearing, and we invest very thoughtfully and very strategically and very surgically in the world that we want. And allowing people to use their retirement capital or their passive income, which is really what investment money is just, I think, very, very strategic. It's the largest source of capital on the planet. Therefore, let's harness it to build the world that we want. That's really the underlying thesis. And we just do that using exchange traded funds. We're also building funds, sort of investment funds that will move money into the communities that are sanctuary cities and that are addressing the issues of Black Lives Matter. We're building another fund that will invest in indigenous infrastructure globally, so helping indigenous communities worldwide build bridges, sanitation, broadband, clean energy, and use those investments as platforms to grow their own economy in alignment with their own traditional values, not being forced to make bad decisions because the only business that's coming to them is dirty business, but allow them to actually build meaningful economies that really make sense within their local container.
Wow, that's a very, very dynamic, very rich sort of creation. I can't see any other, well, it's a beautiful example of how to create in a world that's very messy.
Yeah.
Very messy.
The thing is, money can be creative. That's the thing that most people don't realize. We live in a world that treats money like it's very logical, very linear, and that it's devoid of being generative or creative. I think the opposite is true. I actually think capital is one of the most generative and creative spaces. It's just that very few of us that are generative and creative get inside the house of finance, right? Mostly finance is dominated by people that are working in a much more logical framework where they do one thing, they avoid these risks, they perform within this particular equation, and anything else is extraneous. But if you want to express and be generative, and you want money to be used in a way that is creative, it's actually a very, very powerful canvas. It's just rare to have people with those sort of artistic, generative, entrepreneurial tendencies in finance, because mostly finance tries to squeeze them out and keep them outside.
Indeed. With this reminds me, Valeria, of one of the things that we often talk about in our workshops is really creating powerful teams. One of the things required is really a strong diversity of thought, diversity of experience to bring to the table. How's that shaped the work that you're doing now? I know that that's a huge priority and importance for you. How's that played out for you?
So two things. My team is very diverse. It includes people like Hunter Levins, who's a sustainability kind of business guru, a teacher, a writer, Andrew Rodriguez, who is our quant, our kind of spreadsheet jockey who makes the miracles happen with the numbers. Dorrit Lowson, who's our operations person, comes out of working inside very large companies and even kind of government agencies. So she understands the systems that we're occupying. And then I'm much more the creative. I'm the artistically leaning entrepreneur who I think part of my job is to be invitational, to invite the artists, the activists, the entrepreneurs, the people left out, the people whose intelligence and wisdom normally don't make it inside finance. I feel like it's part of my job to draw up that creative intelligence and make sure that there's a place for it inside what we do, to make sure that we're designing a world that, in Bucky Fuller's words, works for 100% of humanity, that this time the financial system is a ladder out of the messes we're in, up into more kind of regenerative practices, but that ladder is really wide and that it's allowing a lot of people to travel, a lot of people to come inside, a lot of people to feel valued, because I think that's the most heartbreaking part of the financial system. Is it was established in a way that I think has been intimidating, and it's been ring fenced. It's been controlled and contained and sort of kept for the few. And I see this as an opportunity for us to teach people how to be financial activists, to invite literally, the masses inside finance and say, this is how we can be surgical about climate change. These are the financial products. These are the financial moves that we all need to take collectively in order to stop climate change in its tracks, while addressing the growing gap between rich and poor, while deciding that it is all of our purview to act on slavery and sex trafficking using our ability as financial agents. That that we don't have to choose in 2018 caring about women or solving poverty or acting on climate change or stopping cancer-causing chemicals. In fact, the best financial products do it all. And they give market-based returns while taking care of protecting humans and the life support systems of the planet that we all depend on. That it's no longer a moment in time where you can only do one thing. In fact, we have to do many things. We have to do them fast and well with love. But we need to do them by inviting the many inside systems like finance.
Wow. Valeria, this reminds me, you often talk about inclusion, exclusion. Is there anything related to that you'd like to ask Donna? I'm curious.
I was just taking in paradox because, yes, I certainly grew up with an image of the bank being this usually very British, very uptight, definitely male, and absolutely not creative on the side of risk aversion and the idea of injecting into finance the creativity and the entrepreneurship that you were mentioning, Donna, is wonderful, and I can see it as being far-reaching. And the other paradox for me has always been that we are finally at a juncture where we are saying focusing on good is actually going to bring greater wealth, as opposed to how I grew up, where you either were doing good or you were making money. It was one of the two. And I think that it's about time, and it gives me optimism to hear so many, and particularly you, Donna, bring up that the success will come from doing good.
I think that's true. I think the only lag now is our perception. We still live in a moment in time where people fear that the story of socially responsible investing of the last 30 years is the story of now, and it isn't. The world has changed. And so there's a catch-up for people, and there's a bigger catch-up for the financial industry, because the financial industry has been taught that any limiting actions on how diverse a financial product is will impact performance in the negative. Well, that's not true anymore, but that's still the belief that there is a risk to caring about guns, or there's a risk to excluding fossil fuel, that you literally, there's a belief that you can't perform at market rates or beyond market while excluding harmful activities. Except that in the last 6 years, the coal industry lost 90% of its wealth, almost overnight. And there's predictions that the entire fossil economy will go the same way. There's all kinds of evidence. I think there's 2,000 now reports that point at good business practices, ethical business practices lead to superior performance. But this is that fear brain versus heart mind that we were talking about earlier, that we want to believe in love. We want to believe that love does better. We want to believe that good things deserve good financial return, but we're afraid. We're afraid to believe it. We're afraid to want it, to see it, and to believe it. And so that's where we come back to, this moment is entirely about consciousness. This moment is entirely about helping us learn how to step out of fear and step into what could be such a beautiful place. The next 10 to 20 years will either be Blade Runner dark, or they will be so much more beautiful than many of us could imagine. And we are that determining force in the world. We collectively, each of us as individuals, and our own work and our own hearts and minds, and then our ability to collectively find each other and hook up the spaces, almost like we're all little quilt squares, and this is the moment where we need to start building all of the interconnective kind of design between us. But if we can do that, I really believe the next 10 to 20 years can be the most spectacular time in human history. And that's the work in front of us. How do we all, especially those of us looking at the last chapter of our lives, how do we go out in a way that celebrates how magnificent humans can be, how beautiful it is to live in a world where 1 hour of energy from the sun, 1 hour of the solar heat, light, and power to the earth can power our contemporary consumption for a year. It's that abundant, right? There is enormous love and abundance in our universe. It's just that sometimes we fail to see it. We fail to let ourselves feel it. And so I feel like that's what the next 40 years looks like for me. It's getting really, really good at that.
Wow. Donna, how would you say, for those listening, you being part of a conscious team, being a conscious leader yourself, how can people be helping to cultivate this vision that you speak of, that, you know, we're very much at a fork in the road, and we have amazing abundance, prosperity right there if we take the action, take the steps to cultivate it. What would you say for those aspiring other conscious leaders, conscious teams, or those that want to help drive in that direction? What would you say to them?
I think there's a series of things. One is, if you're part of a team that is not conscious, it's time to move. If you are building a company, learn first what those ingredients of consciousness are before you start building. And then more sort of generically for the non-entrepreneurs, we have to learn how to start being very, very conscious with how we vote, with how we shop, and with how we invest. We actually have to become impeccable with those sort of chapters of agency, because we're missing these enormous levers and opportunities to be consciousness in action. And sort of voting, shopping, investing, I think are three just imperative terrains to express and to be generative and impact change in the larger world. There's what I do with my time, what I do through my work, through my job, through my company, and that's my immediate field of vision. But voting, shopping, and investing are very big. And we don't believe we can have impact because we're focused on our small actions. And again, we're missing this collective quilt, the moment of when we act together. Overnight, I mean, in a matter of weeks or months, we could transform the fossil fuel industry by pulling money wholesale out of it, by divesting from the fossil fuel industry and moving that money to clean energy and to other kind of more generative businesses. It can happen really fast, right? We did it in South Africa. We've done it through other boycotts. The power of strategically aligning and moving our money out of bad things is so potent. It's the single fastest, most terrifying trend inside finance. It is the part of finance that people are really nervous about, the the growth of the divestment movement around fossil is terrifying to conventional finance. And so when conventional finance is afraid, the rest of us need to go, okay, how do we now have this become an expression of love? Because it can be. Really, if you give people the option to make $100 by investing in dirty, dark, controlled energy that's tied to murder and mayhem, or you give them an opportunity to make the same $100 through distributed, clean energy that empowers communities, most people are going to choose the second path. They're going to choose this path that is loving and generative and fair and respectful of Earth's systems. Because again, at our core, we're love. And so we need to give them these clear opportunities to express who they are as love through money, express who they are as love through politics, express love through what they buy. Because people don't want to buy slavery and sweatshops. Nobody wants to buy that. It's just until you see it in front of you, until you understand the implications of those decisions, it's sort of easy to do the wrong thing. And so we need to line up all the systems and all of the intelligence and all the thoughtfulness with doing the right thing. And that is what we will do as humans, right? We are good, moral, decent, loving beings. We just need businesses and systems that give us a really honorable chance to express those things.
Wow, that's such a powerful way to make very concrete the ways that we are empowered and that we can take ownership over our actions.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Donna, as we're wrapping up here, what final words would you like to share with our audience, to the conscious leaders, conscious teams listening out there, either with what you're doing with Change Finance or whatever you'd like to share?
I think it comes down to this. I grew up in a house of all women, and I was raised by my grandmother, who was born in 1903. And she was very into needlework. And I realized that as soon as the weather changes, something happens in me and I want to start crocheting or sewing or embroidering, or it's some kind of deep impulse in me. And I think it comes from some of the wisdom and beauty from the women's culture that I inherited. But I feel like this is a moment in time where we all need to be quilt makers. That we need to start looking not just for what are the moves for my individual company, or the very sort of narrow focus that I'm possessing right now, but how do we start building systems, processes, mechanisms, architecture that allows us to start seeing the spaces between and moving up to act in the spaces between us, because part of I think the transition from fear to love is seeing all of the other loving beings, right? Feeling connected, knowing that there's a place for your particular offering in this larger quilt of humanity. And I don't think we've quite figured that out yet. We're still putting so much focus on conscious entrepreneurship and the conscious entrepreneur, which is the lone wolf, right? It's the Steve Jobs story. It's the one person with the tenacity that makes something happen. Well, most of us at a certain age realize, oh, I've never done anything that I didn't do with a whole bunch of other people. That actually everything that mattered was shared with other people. That everything that really mattered was felt through sort of a collective field. And I think that's the real set of opportunities for the 21st century, is how do we reteach the entrepreneur and the generative, artistic individual, the rugged individual, to also remember the collective and to experience. I mean, things like Burning Man, I believe, are that, right? Burning Man is it's an expression of entrepreneurship and artistic sensibility expressed through the collective. It is a collective field experience. That's what people go to Burning Man seeking. And that's what I hear when people talk about what is it that's so magical. I haven't actually been to Burning Man yet, but I think I might try to go next year because I'm so curious about it. But it's that coming together, finding each other, remembering each other, remembering who we were in our ancestry, remembering who we want to be to future generations. And then today, finding our people to express love through this larger kind of collective container with more emphasis on the we and less emphasis on the I. I think those are the spaces I'm most interested in right now.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Donna. This has been really wonderful and really honored and happy to share your story. If people wanted to find out more about you or the work that you're doing, where could they go?
www.change-finance.com. And then I'm out there on the internet. I do a lot on Facebook, and I'm pretty easy to reach, and pretty, again, sort of obsessed with finding larger and larger circles of people to interact with, to do the big things, because I think none of us get to play small anymore. It's not a time to play small.
Oh, I love it. Thank you, Donna.
Thank you.
Conscious leaders, conscious teams, thank you for joining us today. Really excited to have you with us to share this conversation with Donna. And then we'll be continuing this conversation. As Donna said, that it's not a time to play small. It's a time to really build that quilt together. So let's do that. Thank you, everyone. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. We have many more exciting thought leaders to come on this show. If you enjoyed this interview, please click the like button and also subscribe so that you can stay tuned to learn from other powerful thought leaders in future shows. We would also appreciate your comments and feedback on the show, as well as who else you would like to hear from. And don't forget to visit our site, IGEOS.net, to download the free worksheet on the 5 disciplines of a high-performance team. See you next time.